The first thing Gabriel Santos noticed was the silence that followed him through the glass doors. It was not complete silence. The Amihan dining room still carried the soft clink of silverware, the murmur of Friday night conversations, and the low piano arrangement that Gabriel himself had approved months earlier. But around the entrance, something changed. A hostess looked up. A server slowed. A man waiting near the coat stand glanced at Gabriel's dusty work boots and then quickly looked away. Gabriel had spent the entire afternoon helping renovate the kitchen of a community center in Daly City. Drywall dust clung to the knees of his jeans. A pale streak of primer crossed one sleeve of the faded green jacket he wore, the same jacket his father had owned for nearly 20 years. His hands were clean, but paint still marked the lines around his fingernails. He looked like a man who had worked all day because that was exactly what he was. He also happened to own the restaurant. The fact amused him for exactly 3 seconds. Then the hostess stepped in front of the podium and said, "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked." Gabriel glanced past her. 3 two-top tables stood empty near the windows. At the bar, 4 stools were open. A server was resetting a table near the center of the room, but no guests waited beside it. "I don't have a reservation," Gabriel said. "I was hoping for 1 seat. The bar is fine." The hostess, Lauren Pierce, gave the smallest shake of her head. Gabriel knew her name because he knew every employee on the payroll, even if most of them had never met him in person. The San Francisco location had opened while he was dividing his weeks between a new restaurant project in Sacramento and long afternoons helping his father recover from a difficult surgery. Hiring had been handled by the operations team. Training reports had come through polished and complete. Customer satisfaction had looked acceptable, if not exceptional. Lauren did not know the tired man in front of her had read those reports at 2 in the morning. "The bar is reserved for dining guests tonight," she said. Gabriel looked at the empty stools again. "I would be a dining guest." A young server carrying a tray passed behind Lauren and tried not to smile. Gabriel caught it. Before he could say anything else, another woman approached from the dining room. Madeline Kerr, the floor manager, moved with the calm certainty of someone who had spent years learning how to make irritation look professional. Her black suit was immaculate. A silver pin with the Amihan logo rested at her lapel. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Lauren lowered her voice, but not enough. "He wants a table." Madeline's eyes moved over Gabriel from boots to jacket to face. The examination lasted no more than a second, yet Gabriel understood every conclusion she had made. "Sir," Madeline said, "we have a dress standard." Gabriel looked down at himself. "I wasn't aware we had one that prevented someone in work clothes from eating." The word we passed unnoticed. Madeline folded her hands. "This is an upscale restaurant. We try to protect the experience for everyone." The sentence was smooth. The meaning underneath it was not. Gabriel had heard versions of it before. Not here, he thought, never here. He had built Amihan around the opposite idea. At 10 years old, newly arrived in California from Quezon City, Gabriel had spent evenings sitting in a laundromat while his mother finished her shift at a nearby care home. His father, Ernesto, sometimes came straight from maintenance jobs with grease on his sleeves. On rare nights when the family ate somewhere other than home, Ernesto always washed his hands in the restaurant restroom before sitting down, even if he had already washed them at work. He used to tell Gabriel that people noticed a uniform before they noticed a face. Years later, when Gabriel opened his first food stall at a weekend market in South San Francisco, he remembered that sentence. He served construction workers beside software engineers, nurses beside delivery drivers, families dressed for church beside teenagers in hoodies. He remembered names. He gave extra rice to people who looked like they had skipped lunch. He never asked anyone to prove they belonged near his counter. That principle had followed him into every Amihan location, or so he had believed. "I can pay for dinner," Gabriel said. Madeline's expression tightened. "That's not the issue." "Then what is?" She exhaled through her nose and glanced toward 2 guests who had begun watching. "The issue is that our guests come here expecting a certain atmosphere. We can't seat everyone who walks in looking like they just came off a job site." Gabriel felt something inside him go still. He did not raise his voice. He had learned long ago that volume usually helped the person who had less control. So if I had changed clothes first, he said, there would be a seat. Madeline looked at the empty tables, then back at him. It would be a different conversation. Another server had stopped near the service station. Lauren stared at the screen on the podium, as if it suddenly required all of her attention. Gabriel nodded once. All right, he said. Madeline seemed surprised by how easily he accepted it. There's a casual place 2 blocks west, she offered. You'd probably be more comfortable there. Gabriel almost smiled, but there was no humor in him now. Maybe, he said. He turned and walked out. Cold evening air met him on the sidewalk. Traffic moved along the Embarcadero in bands of white and red light. Across the street, his old silver Toyota Tacoma waited beneath a street lamp. Ernesto had sold him the truck for $1 years earlier, because, as he had said, a man respected something more if he technically paid for it. Gabriel climbed inside and closed the door. For several seconds he did nothing. His hands rested on the steering wheel. Through the windshield he could see Amihan glowing warmly behind glass. The carved wood panels had been made by a Filipino-American craftsman in Oakland. The hanging lights were shaped after Capi's shells. Near the entrance, a framed photograph showed Gabriel's mother rolling lumpia at a kitchen table in 1998. A restaurant built from family memories had just told him his father's jacket did not belong inside. He could have walked back immediately. He could have called Elena Ramos, his director of operations, and ended the matter in 30 seconds. He could have introduced himself, watched expressions change, and satisfied the sharp part of him that wanted immediate correction. Instead, Gabriel took out his phone. He opened the Amihan Operations app. Face recognition unlocked the corporate dashboard. His name appeared at the top of the screen. Gabriel Santos, founder and owner. Below it were live feeds from 6 security cameras. Gabriel stared at the screen, then at the restaurant across the street. He had spent years telling managers that character was what people did when leadership was not in the room. For the first time, he realized he had the chance to see whether his own company believed him. He tapped the camera marked front of house. A digital clock in the corner read 8:16 p.m. Gabriel leaned back in the driver's seat. He decided he would watch for 8 minutes. During the first minute, Gabriel discovered that Lauren had lied. The reservation screen was visible through the owner dashboard because the camera system and table management software shared the same operations panel. 11 seats were available across the dining room. 2 tables were being held for guests arriving later, but 3 were open for walk-ins. The 4 bar stools Gabriel had seen were also unassigned. He did not feel angry yet. Mostly he felt disappointed by how quickly a simple assumption had become a false statement. At 8:17, Lauren leaned toward Madeline and said something that the entrance microphone caught clearly. He really thought he was getting in dressed like that. A server named Kyle Mercer laughed while polishing a water glass. Madeline answered, "People see nice windows and think rules stop applying to them." Gabriel saved the clip. The second minute began with the front door opening. A middle-aged couple entered. Both wore practical clothes, hiking-style jackets, clean sneakers, and backpacks small enough to have come from a day of sightseeing. The woman asked whether they could eat without a reservation. Lauren looked toward Madeline. Madeline shook her head. "We're committed for the evening," Lauren said. The man glanced at the empty bar. "Even there?" "Unfortunately." They thanked her and left without argument. 30 seconds later, 2 men in tailored jackets came through the same door. They also had no reservation. One of them asked whether there was any chance of getting something to eat. This time, Madeline stepped forward herself. "Of course," she said brightly. "We can make the bar work." She personally pulled out 2 stools. Gabriel stared at the screen. He did not know what bothered him more, the inconsistency or how effortless it appeared. There was no meeting, no discussion, no difficult judgment call. The decision happened in seconds, practiced enough to feel normal. By the 3rd minute, he was no longer watching only as an owner. He was watching as someone trying to understand a system. The restaurant had underperformed projections by almost 9% for the last quarter. Madeline had blamed neighborhood construction and slower corporate dinners. The explanation had sounded reasonable, and Gabriel had moved on. Now he wondered how many customers had simply been told there was no room. He switched to the service station camera. Kyle stood with Lauren and another server, Priya Shah. A printed seating chart rested on the counter. Green jackets, table 7, Kyle joked. Another emergency avoided. Priya did not laugh. She looked uncomfortable, then picked up a tray and walked away. Gabriel paused the feed. That mattered. Not everyone, then. He rewound 10 seconds and watched Priya's face again. She had not challenged the comment, but she had not joined it either. The distinction was small. Still, Gabriel had spent enough years managing people to know that small distinctions often became important later. At the 4th minute, another camera showed Madeline behind the service station, opening a locked drawer used for tip envelopes. Gabriel sat forward. His company did not use a pooled cash system anymore, but private events occasionally left cash gratuities that were recorded and distributed at the end of the night. Madeline removed an envelope, counted the bills, then placed the money back. Nothing appeared improper. Gabriel almost felt relief. Then she took a sticky note from the counter and wrote something on it. The camera zoom was good enough for him to read the words when she placed it on top of the envelope. Kyle, extra. Good save at door. Gabriel's jaw tightened. It was not theft. It was worse in a quieter way. She was rewarding behavior. He opened the staffing notes associated with the location. Managers could add performance comments for monthly reviews. Madeline had submitted dozens. Kyle, protect standards, strong instincts with guest fit. Lauren, excellent judgment at host stand. Understands brand positioning. Priya, needs confidence. Sometimes over-accommodates walk-ins. Gabriel read the final line twice. Over-accommodates. The 5th minute passed while he searched archived guest feedback. There were more complaints than he remembered seeing in the monthly summary. Not hundreds, not even dozens, but enough to form a pattern. A retired teacher wrote that she and her sister had felt unwelcome after arriving early from a museum visit in casual clothes. A delivery company supervisor said his team had been told there was no availability, although the dining room appeared half empty. A family visiting from Fresno wrote that the hostess changed her tone after they mentioned they were celebrating a graduation and asked about menu prices. Every complaint had been marked resolved by location management. Resolution notes were vague. Guest expectations misaligned with concept. Reservation misunderstanding. Dress standard confusion. Gabriel's disappointment turned inward. He had approved the system that allowed location managers to close low-level complaints without corporate review. The idea had been efficiency. Let leaders solve problems close to where they happened. Trust people. Avoid turning every awkward dinner into an executive issue. Trust, Gabriel thought, was not the same as blindness. At the 6th minute, he opened the internal chat archive. Employees used an approved messaging channel for shift notes, menu questions, and table updates. Most messages were ordinary: supply notes, lost items, allergy reminders. Then Gabriel found a repeated phrase, grey table. At first he thought it referred to one of the tablecloth colors used for private events, but Amihan did not have grey tablecloths. He searched the phrase. 23 results appeared. Grey table at door. Says he can pay. 2 possible greys asking for bar. Grey turned away. All good. Kyle had used the term most often. Lauren had responded with laughing emojis twice. Madeline had written it once herself. Keep grey tables moving. We cannot let the room lose its feel. Gabriel rubbed his thumb across the edge of his phone. The 7th minute began. He clicked the entrance feed again. Priya was speaking quietly to Lauren. There were open seats, she said. Lauren shrugged. Madeline decides. But that man wasn't doing anything. Priya, don't start. I'm just saying he asked for dinner. Madeline appeared from outside the camera frame. Is there a problem? Priya immediately straightened. No. Madeline studied her. Then get to table 9 and stop worrying about people who aren't our guests. Priya walked away. Gabriel watched her disappear toward the kitchen. He wondered how many times she had almost spoken and stopped. Then Kyle came into frame, smiling. What if your guy comes back? He asked. Madeline looked toward the front windows. He won't. And if he does? Madeline adjusted the silver pin on her lapel. Then we remind him that this isn't a waiting room, a shelter, or a place to warm up. He can find somewhere that fits him better. Gabriel saved the clip. The clock changed to 8:23, 7 minutes. He was reaching for Elena's number when someone tapped on the passenger side window. Gabriel turned. A young woman stood beside the truck holding a bottle of water. He recognized her only after she pointed toward the restaurant. Her name was Maya Lim, 21, temporary banquet assistant. First shift. Gabriel lowered the window. Maya looked nervous. "Sir," she said, "I know this is strange. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." She held out the water. Gabriel accepted it slowly. "Won't you get in trouble?" Maya glanced toward Amihan's windows. "Maybe." "Then why come out?" She hesitated. "Because they made it sound like you did something wrong just by walking in. You didn't." Gabriel looked at the bottle in his hand. Maya added, "Even if you couldn't afford dinner, they didn't have to embarrass you." The digital clock on his dashboard turned to 8:24, 8 minutes. Gabriel looked back at the restaurant. He had seen enough. Gabriel did not tell Maya who he was. He thanked her for the water and asked one question. "How long have you worked there?" "Tonight is my first night," she said. "I'm with Bay Shift Staffing. They needed someone for a private lunch tomorrow, so they asked me to shadow tonight." Gabriel nodded. That explained why her name had appeared on the temporary roster, but not in the employee review files. It also meant she had entered the building without learning the habits everyone else seemed to accept. "Go back inside," he said. "And don't worry." Maya gave him an uncertain look, then crossed the street. Gabriel waited until the service door closed behind her before calling Elena Ramos. She answered on the first ring. "Gabe? Where are you?" "At home. Why?" "I need you at San Francisco. Bring the current staff files and the termination policy." Silence. Elena knew him well enough to hear what was beneath his calm. "What happened?" Gabriel looked at the Capiz-style lights glowing through the front windows. "I was refused a table." "What?" "They thought I looked like I shouldn't be there. I watched the cameras for 8 minutes after I left. Elena, this isn't one bad interaction." Her voice changed immediately from surprise to focus. "I'll leave now. Call Daniel Cho on the way. Ask him to join by video if he can't get here quickly. I want every step clean. No impulsive decisions." Daniel was outside counsel for labor and operations matters. Gabriel rarely called him at night. "Understood," Elena said. Gabriel ended the call and remained in the truck. The sharpest version of his anger had already passed. In its place was something heavier, responsibility. He had built Amihan slowly. The first version had been a folding canopy at a weekend market, where rainwater sometimes collected on the canvas, until Gabriel had to push it upward with a broom handle. His mother made sauces in a rented commercial kitchen after work. Ernesto welded a stainless steel shelf onto an old cart, because Gabriel could not afford a new one. Their first menu had 6 items and 1 dessert. The business grew because people returned, not influencers, not critics. People. A hospital custodian who came every Saturday. A young couple who celebrated 3 anniversaries at Gabriel's first small dining room. A city bus driver named Terence, who insisted the chicken adobo tasted better after midnight, even though the restaurant closed at 10. Families who brought parents, then children, then grandchildren. Gabriel had never wanted Amihan to feel exclusive in the way many expensive places did. He wanted it to feel special without making anyone feel small. Somewhere between the 5th location, investor meetings, expansion plans, vendor negotiations, and the 100 decisions that arrived before breakfast, he had begun to assume that intention traveled automatically through an organization. It did not. At 8:31, 7 minutes after Maya walked away, Gabriel left the truck. He crossed the street carrying the unopened bottle of water. When he entered Amihan again, Lauren's expression hardened before she could hide it. "Sir, we already explained. I need to speak with Madeline." His voice was quiet enough that she leaned forward to hear him. "She already spoke to you." "Then please ask her to do it again." Lauren glanced toward the dining room. Kyle, standing nearby, noticed Gabriel and gave an amused shake of his head. Madeline arrived less than a minute later. This time no polite smile appeared. "Sir," she said, "you need to leave." Gabriel placed the bottle of water on the host podium. Before I do, I'd like you to answer something. Why was the couple in hiking jackets told there was no room, while the two men who arrived after them were seated at the bar? For the first time, Madeline's confidence shifted, only slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. You seated them yourself. Have you been standing outside watching the restaurant? Yes. Kyle laughed under his breath. Madeline's posture stiffened. That's inappropriate. Gabriel nearly admired the speed with which she repositioned herself as the offended party. Were seats available when I arrived? He asked. I've already explained our policy. That wasn't my question. Several nearby diners had begun listening. Gabriel did not want a spectacle, but he also would not let Madeline push the conversation into the hallway where no one could see her choices. She lowered her voice. You are making guests uncomfortable. I haven't spoken to any guests. Your presence is disruptive. There it was. Gabriel looked at her for a moment, then at the silver Amihan pin on her lapel. Do you know what Amihan means? He asked. Madeline frowned. Of course I do. Tell me. It's a seasonal wind in the Philippines. A cool northeast wind, Gabriel said. My mother chose the name. She said a good restaurant should feel like that wind after a hot day, something that makes people feel relief when they arrive. Madeline stared at him. That's lovely, she said flatly, but you still need to go. The front door opened behind Gabriel. Elena Ramos entered carrying a leather folio and a laptop bag. Madeline's face changed. Elena was not famous, but every manager in the company knew her. She ran quarterly meetings, approved promotions, and signed operational evaluations. Her photograph appeared on the internal directory beside the title Chief Operating Officer. Eleanor, Madeline said, suddenly smiling. I didn't know you were coming in tonight. Eleanor did not return the smile. She walked directly to Gabriel. Mr. Santos, she said, Daniel is on standby. I brought everything you asked for. The words landed gently. Their effect was immediate. Lauren looked from Elena to Gabriel. Kyle stopped moving altogether. Madeline's face lost color. Mr. Santos, she repeated. Gabriel reached up and slowly removed his father's green jacket. Underneath, he wore a plain charcoal t-shirt marked with a small streak of white paint. Nothing about him suddenly looked wealthier. Nothing had changed, except what they knew. That was the point. Gabriel Santos, Elena said, turning toward the host stand. Founder and owner of Amihan Restaurant Group. Nobody spoke. Gabriel could hear the low music again. He could also hear a spoon touch a plate at a nearby table. Madeline opened her mouth. I didn't realize. Gabriel raised one hand. I know. She stopped. He looked around at Lauren, Kyle, the servers watching from the service station, and Madeline standing beneath the framed photograph of his mother. You didn't know who I was, Gabriel said. So you showed me exactly how you treat someone when you think knowing their name won't matter. Madeline swallowed. Mr. Santos, I can explain. You will, he said, but first, everyone working this shift is going to listen. Elena closed the front door and quietly asked the hostess to stop seating new guests. The diners already inside were allowed to remain. Gabriel asked the kitchen to continue service, while Elena moved the staff conversation behind the private event partition. His instinct was to keep everything controlled. His father used to say that work was measured by what a person did after discovering a mistake. The useful question was what came next. 12 employees gathered around a long walnut table. Priya stood near the end, while Maya remained by the service door, unsure whether she belonged with the group. Gabriel pointed to her. You can stay. Madeline noticed the bottle of water on the host stand and understood. Elena opened her laptop. Before anyone says anything, Gabriel began, I want to be clear about what this is not. This is not about embarrassing me. If the only problem tonight were that someone failed to recognize the owner, I would correct the misunderstanding and go home. He let his gaze move around the group. The problem is what happened because you did not recognize me. Gabriel mirrored his phone to Elena's laptop and turned the screen so the staff could see. He played the clip of Lauren saying they were fully booked, then showed the seating chart with available tables. Lauren's cheeks turned red. I was following Madeline's direction, she said quickly. Madeline looked at her. Gabriel did not react. He played the second clip, the casually dressed couple being turned away, followed by the two well-dressed men being seated without reservations. "That's discretion," Madeline said. "Managers make judgment calls constantly." "Based on what?" Gabriel asked. She paused. "The room, the brand, guest expectations." "Those are not criteria, those are words." Madeline folded her arms. "You hired me to protect an upscale concept." "I hired you to operate a restaurant." Gabriel played the clip of Kyle joking about the rejected guests. Kyle's smile vanished. Then came the sticky note on the gratuity envelope. "Good save at door." Gabriel faced Madeline. "You linked extra compensation to turning people away. That was recognition for supporting standards. Standards that don't exist in our handbook." Madeline glanced at Elena, perhaps hoping for support. Elena said nothing. Gabriel opened the customer complaints and read short excerpts. Guests dismissed, open tables denied, and visitors who felt their clothes changed the staff's tone. He did not dramatize the language. He did not need to. Then he showed the internal messages containing the phrase "grey table." That changed the room. Priya closed her eyes briefly. Maya looked toward the floor. "What does that mean?" Gabriel asked. No one answered. "Kyle?" Kyle cleared his throat. "It's just shorthand." "For what?" "A walk-in who probably isn't a fit." "What makes someone not a fit?" Kyle looked at Madeline. Gabriel waited. Finally, Priya spoke. "Usually clothes. Sometimes how they ask about prices. Sometimes if they look like they came from work." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Madeline turned toward her sharply. "Priya!" Gabriel raised his hand again. "Let her finish." Priya's eyes were wet, though she kept her voice steady. "I didn't like it. I should have said something earlier. I didn't." Gabriel regarded her carefully. That admission mattered more to him than an excuse would have. "How long has this been happening?" "Since before I started," Priya said. "I've been here 4 months." Gabriel looked at Elena. She had gone very still. Madeline stepped forward. "This is getting distorted. We have demanding guests. We have reviews to protect. We need consistency. You can't run fine dining like a food court." The reference to the food court might have sounded harmless to anyone else. To Gabriel, it pulled him backward 26 years, to a folding stall beside a row of plastic tables where his mother had stood for hours serving food from aluminum trays. He did not let the memory control him. "You're right about one thing," he said. "Consistency matters." Madeline seemed almost relieved. "Then you understand? Every guest should receive consistent respect." Her relief disappeared. Gabriel looked around the staff again. "I started serving food in places where nobody cared what shoes a customer wore. My parents worked jobs that left marks on their clothes. Many of the people who kept my first business alive came straight from construction sites, hospitals, warehouses, buses, schools, and kitchens. If Amihan has become a place where those same people are treated like a problem at the door, then we have failed at the most basic thing this company was built to do." No one moved. He continued, softer now. "And I failed too." That surprised them. Elena looked at him. Gabriel placed both hands on the back of a chair. "I trusted reports instead of checking the room. I expanded faster than I inspected culture. I created a complaint process that gave one manager too much ability to close concerns without review. Leadership does not get to take credit for growth and then act shocked when a bad system grows too." For the first time since he returned, Madeline's expression shifted from defense to uncertainty. Gabriel was not giving her the enemy she expected. He was taking responsibility without removing hers. Elena's laptop chimed softly. A message from Daniel Cho appeared. She read it twice, then leaned toward Gabriel. "Corporate finished the archive check," she said quietly. "Every permanent employee assigned to this location appears in the grey table record. Some used the term directly. Others acknowledged shift notes built around it. The kitchen tickets also show the same priority code. Daniel says the policy was unauthorized, concealed from corporate, and documented well enough for immediate action." Gabriel said nothing for several seconds. This was where anger would have been easiest, which was exactly why he refused to let anger make the decision. "Every permanent employee?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Everyone on the current roster. Maya is agency staff. She is not part of it." Gabriel looked at Priya. Her face had fallen. She had objected quietly tonight, but the record showed that she had still acknowledged the code in previous shift summaries. Silence had not created the system, yet silence had helped it survive. He looked toward the kitchen door. The cooks had not chosen who entered, but the ticket history showed that they had learned to treat the coded tables differently once those guests were seated. What Madeline had built was not one rude habit at the host stand. It had spread through the entire operation. 8 minutes had shown Gabriel the doorway into the problem. 6 months of record showed him its size. He turned to Elena. "Is Daniel comfortable with termination tonight, provided each person receives the documentation and the normal review rights?" "Yes." Gabriel faced the staff. "The restaurant will close after the current guests finish. Tomorrow's service is cancelled. Effective tonight, every permanent employee assigned to this location is being released from the San Francisco team." A wave of shocked breathing moved around the table. Madeline stared at him. "You're firing everyone because of one evening?" "No," Gabriel said. "I'm ending a system that existed for months. Tonight is simply the first night I saw it with my own eyes." He looked at Priya before continuing. "Some of you participated more than others. Some of you were uncomfortable. Those differences will be documented, and they may matter if you apply to work with this company again after retraining. But the current team ends tonight. I cannot reopen these doors by pretending a culture can be repaired, while every habit that created it remains in place." The silence that followed felt different from the one at the entrance. This time, nobody was judging Gabriel's clothes. They were considering what they had allowed to become normal. By 7 the next morning, the Amihan dining room looked entirely different. Without guests, music, candles, or servers moving between tables, it was simply a room filled with expensive furniture and early grey light. Delivery trucks rolled past outside. The bay beyond the windows looked flat and metallic beneath the morning fog. Gabriel sat alone at the bar with black coffee and his laptop. His father's green jacket hung from the back of the stool beside him. He had slept less than 3 hours. Not because he was furious, but because questions kept arranging themselves in his mind. How had Madeline's system developed? Who had participated? Who had objected? What had corporate missed? And how much of the failure belonged to Gabriel himself? Elena arrived at 7:20, carrying 2 paper bags from a bakery. "You haven't eaten," she said. It was not a question. Gabriel looked at the pastry she placed in front of him. "You sound like my mother." "Your mother is usually right." He tore off a small piece and returned to the screen. Overnight, Elena had exported 6 months of scheduling notes, customer feedback, employee evaluations, and internal messages. Daniel had advised them to document carefully, avoid public accusations, and separate bad judgment from violations of company standards. Gabriel appreciated the restraint. He did not want revenge. He wanted truth precise enough to build with. The first pattern was unmistakable. Madeline had gradually created an unofficial hierarchy for guests. It was never written as a formal rule. Instead, it lived inside phrases such as protect the room, brand fit, strong walk-in, uncertain walk-in, and grey table. Employees who adopted her instincts received better sections, more favorable notes, and first choice on certain shifts. Employees who questioned decisions were described as hesitant, overly accommodating, or not yet ready for leadership. Priya's evaluations showed exactly that pattern. She had strong customer comments, low order error rates, and several compliments by name. Yet Madeline had denied her request to train as a lead server twice. Reason: struggles with boundaries. Gabriel leaned back. "Boundaries," he said. Elena nodded. "I'm seeing it too." They reviewed the video from the previous night again. Priya had challenged Lauren quietly after Gabriel left. She had not confronted Madeline, but she had spoken. "That matters," Gabriel said. "It does," Elena agreed. "It also doesn't erase 4 months of silence." "No." Gabriel appreciated that Eleanor did not simplify people for him. By 9, the post-termination interviews began. Daniel joined by secure video from his office. Elena met each former employee in the small private dining room so the record could distinguish levels of responsibility. Gabriel listened from another room through summarized notes, rather than sitting in on every conversation. The terminations had already taken effect, but he wanted the company to understand people accurately, especially if any of them later completed retraining and applied again. Lauren's interview lasted 34 minutes. Her explanation was consistent. Madeline trained her to protect the restaurant's atmosphere and taught her to use visual judgment when deciding whether to offer walk-in seating. Lauren admitted she had become comfortable with the practice. She also admitted she knew tables were available when she told Gabriel they were full. When Elena asked why she lied, Lauren answered, "Because that's what we do." The sentence hit Gabriel harder than any insult from the previous night. Because that's what we do. Culture in 5 words. Kyle treated the internal term grey table as harmless workplace humor. He claimed no one meant to make anyone feel small and insisted upscale restaurants always made subtle choices about atmosphere. He also admitted Madeline rewarded staff who supported her seating decisions. Madeline's interview lasted nearly 2 hours. She remained composed. She defended the system as brand management and argued that Gabriel's expansion had created pressure to deliver a premium experience. At one point, she said something that stayed with him. "You wanted this place to be important. Important places have standards." Eleanor relayed the sentence afterward. Gabriel walked to the dining room windows and looked out at the morning traffic. Maybe that was the misunderstanding at the center of everything. He had wanted Amihan to be excellent. Somewhere along the way, excellence had been translated into exclusivity. Those were not the same thing. The remaining interviews showed different degrees of responsibility, but the same organizational pattern. Some employees had used the code casually. Others had followed special ticket priorities without asking where they came from. Priya admitted she disliked the practice and occasionally worked around it, yet she had also signed shift summaries containing the code because she was afraid of losing hours. Gabriel did not treat those choices as identical. He asked Elena to mark Priya's file as eligible to reapply after completing the new service program. 2 kitchen employees who had simply followed ticket markings received the same notation. Madeline, Lauren, Kyle, and several others would not be eligible. But one point did not change. The old team was over. Every permanent employee assigned to Amihan San Francisco had been released the night before. The restaurant would stay closed for at least 1 week, while Gabriel rebuilt staffing, training, complaint review, and the meaning of service from the ground up. Maya arrived shortly after 3 to collect a tote bag she had left in the staff room. She stopped when she saw Gabriel near the entrance. This time she knew exactly who he was. Her embarrassment was immediate. "Mr. Santos?" Gabriel smiled faintly. "Yesterday it was sir. Yesterday I didn't know. That's why yesterday mattered." Maya looked at the floor. "I hope I didn't cause trouble." "You didn't." He picked up the bottle of water she had given him. He had brought it back from the truck and placed it on the host stand that morning. "You gave me this when you thought I was nobody important." Maya looked confused. "You were important. I just didn't know you owned anything." Gabriel's expression softened. "That's the best answer I've heard in 24 hours. He asked about her studies. Maya was finishing a hospitality management program at a community college and working temporary shifts to help pay tuition. She wanted to manage hotels someday, but worried she lacked the kind of confidence employers seemed to expect. Gabriel listened. Then he offered her a paid internship with Amihan's operations team, beginning after the restaurant reopened. Maya stared at him. "Because I brought you water?" "No," Gabriel said. "Because you noticed something was wrong before you had any reason to believe noticing would benefit you." "The water just made it visible," she accepted with a stunned smile. After she left, Gabriel remained by the front doors. His phone contained messages from investors asking why the restaurant was temporarily closed. A local food blogger had already noticed the cancelled reservations. Questions would come. But for the first time since the previous night, Gabriel felt steady. He had entered his restaurant expecting dinner and discovered a problem larger than one rude conversation. He had also discovered something about himself. Leadership was not proving that he had the power to fire people. It was proving that he could use power carefully when anger would have made care inconvenient. Gabriel looked at his father's jacket hanging over his arm. Then he turned towards the empty dining room. The next question was no longer who would leave. It was what kind of place would exist when the doors opened again. The restaurant stayed dark for 8 days. From the sidewalk, Amihan San Francisco looked less like a celebrated dining room and more like a promise someone had temporarily stopped making. The chairs were turned upside down on tables during the mornings. Delivery schedules had been suspended. A small printed notice on the door said the restaurant was closed for staff training and operational review. It did not offer excuses, and Gabriel had refused every suggestion to call the closure a renovation. "If we are correcting people," he told Elena, "we should start by telling the truth about ourselves." By Monday, the private dining room had become a temporary command center. Laptops covered one table. Employee manuals covered another. On the wall, Elena had taped sheets of paper under 3 headings: what we rewarded, what we ignored, and what we want to become. Gabriel disliked the first 2 columns more each day. Some failures were obvious. Complaints had been routed through the location manager instead of an independent corporate channel. Walk-in decisions had almost no written standards. Service evaluations rewarded check averages and table efficiency far more heavily than guest comments about warmth or respect. Other failures were quieter. One corporate memo praised the San Francisco team for protecting a premium atmosphere. Another congratulated Madeline for reducing low-spend walk-ins during peak hours. No memo told her to judge a person by clothing. No policy asked anyone to lie about empty tables. But Gabriel could see how language, repeated without care, could become permission in the wrong hands. He circled the phrase premium atmosphere with a pen. "I approved this report," he said. Elena looked over from her laptop. "You approved a 100-page quarterly package. My name is still on it. That doesn't make you responsible for every bad interpretation." Gabriel stared at the page for a moment. "No, but it makes me responsible for fixing the space where that interpretation was allowed to grow." That afternoon, Maya joined them for the first day of her paid internship. She arrived 20 minutes early in a navy blouse, black slacks, and shoes so new they squeaked faintly against the floor. Gabriel noticed that she carried 3 pens in her pocket and a notebook already divided with colored tabs. "You look prepared," he said. "I watched 6 videos about corporate internships last night." "Forget 5 of them." She smiled nervously. "Which 5? Any 5? The answer relaxed her more than reassurance would have. Gabriel did not place Maya behind the host stand or ask her to perform symbolic acts of kindness for visitors. He assigned her to Elena and told her to observe the rebuild as if she were studying a failed system in class. Her job was to ask questions adults with titles sometimes stopped asking. She took the instruction literally. By lunch, she had asked why guest complaints were classified by department instead of by experience, why the host team could see estimated spending history for returning customers, and why the employee handbook used the phrase ideal guest without defining what that meant. Eleanor slowly lowered her coffee after the 3rd question. "Keep her," she told Gabriel. Maya looked from one to the other. "Was that a test?" "No," Gabriel said. "That's why you passed." The most difficult question came later. They were reviewing applications for the new team when Maya noticed Priya Shah's name. "She worked here before?" "Yes." "And she was released with everyone else?" "Yes." Maya hesitated, but she tried to say something that night. "I heard her tell Lauren there were open tables." Gabriel closed the file. "She also stayed in a system she knew was wrong for months." "So did the company," Maya said. The room went quiet. Maya's face changed immediately. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Don't apologize." Gabriel leaned back in his chair. He had hired Maya because she noticed things before knowing whether noticing would benefit her. He could not punish her the first time that instinct made him uncomfortable. "You're right," he said. The words were harder to say than he expected. That evening, Gabriel drove to Daly City instead of going home. The community center kitchen was nearly finished. New cabinets lined the wall where he had spent the previous Friday, sanding and painting. A volunteer crew was installing shelves, and the smell of fresh wood mixed with garlic from a cooking class in the next room. Ernesto Santos sat near the doorway, assembling drawer handles one at a time. At 71, Gabriel's father had slowed after surgery, but he still disliked sitting without a task. He wore an old baseball cap and a grey work shirt buttoned to the collar. "Your mother says you fired an entire restaurant," Ernesto said without looking up. Gabriel stopped. "How did she hear that?" "Your mother knows things before newspapers." Gabriel pulled out a chair. He told his father the story without dramatizing it. The refusal, the 8 minutes, the cameras, the records, the closure. He expected Ernesto to focus on the insult involving his old jacket. Instead, his father asked, "Did you know the people you fired?" "Not well enough." Ernesto nodded, as if that answer mattered. "When I supervised maintenance at the hotel, there was a man named Peter who was always late," he said. "Everyone said he was lazy. I almost wrote him up. Then I learned he took 2 buses because the early route had changed, so we moved his start time 20 minutes. He was never late again." Gabriel waited. "People are not problems on paper," Ernesto continued, "but sometimes a bad habit is still a bad habit. Understanding why it happened does not mean you keep it. It means you build better after." Gabriel looked through the open doorway toward the new community kitchen. 8 days earlier, he had wanted to know who deserved to lose a job. Now he was asking a more difficult question. Who deserved a second chance? And what would a second chance have to require? On the drive home, Gabriel kept returning to the difference between mercy and lowered standards. He did not want to rebuild Amihan by pretending consequences had been unnecessary. He also did not want one frightened season in a person's career to become a permanent definition of that person. His father had given him a useful boundary. Understand the reason, then decide whether the behavior could change. The answer would have to come from what someone did next, not from how convincingly they explained what had already happened. The next morning, he called Priya. "I want to talk," he said. "Not about giving you your old job back. About whether either of us has learned enough to build a different one." There was a long pause. Then Priya answered quietly, "I was hoping you would call." Priya arrived at Amihan carrying no resume. Gabriel noticed that immediately. Most people invited to discuss a possible return to a company would have brought a folder, references, perhaps a carefully prepared explanation. Priya brought only herself and a small notebook with a bent corner. She sat across from Gabriel and Elena at the long table in the private dining room, where the old seating charts had been replaced by training plans. "I don't want to pretend I was brave," she said, before either of them asked a question. Gabriel folded his hands. "Good place to start." Priya explained that she had disliked Madeleine's unofficial system from the beginning. At first, she thought it was temporary, a manager trying too hard to make a new location feel exclusive. When the grey table language spread, Priya occasionally ignored it. She seated people Lauren had tried to turn away. She removed coded notes from tickets. Once she switched sections with another server so an older couple in work clothes would not receive the rushed treatment employees had begun associating with certain tables, but she never formally challenged Madeleine. "I told myself small corrections were enough," Priya said. "They weren't." "Why didn't you contact corporate?" Elena asked. Priya gave a tired smile. "I thought I did." She opened the notebook and slid a page toward them. On it was a date from 4 months earlier and a confirmation number. Priya had submitted an employee concern through the company's internal portal. The complaint described inconsistent seating rules and pressure to judge walk-ins based on appearance. 2 days later, she received a notice saying the matter had been reviewed locally and resolved. Gabriel felt his jaw tighten. The complaint system had routed concerns back to the very manager they concerned. Madeleine had closed Priya's report herself. Priya had tried again 6 weeks later, this time describing the coded table notes. That complaint was also closed at the location level. "After that," she said, "my Friday shifts disappeared for almost a month. I couldn't prove the 2 things were connected. Maybe they weren't. But I got scared. I needed the hours, so I stopped pushing." Gabriel looked at Elena. Neither spoke for several seconds. The story did not erase Priya's silence. It changed its shape. Gabriel had spent the last week treating responsibility like a clean line. Priya reminded him that systems could make that line harder to cross without erasing it. "If you came back," he said, "you would not come back as the person who quietly fixes things around a bad rule. You would have to be willing to challenge the rule itself." Priya met his eyes. "I know. Even if the person who wrote it is me." A small pause. "Especially then." Gabriel nodded. He offered her a 90-day position as service lead, conditional on completing the new training program with everyone else. It was not a promotion from her old role, and not a restoration of what had been lost. It was a new job with one unusual responsibility, written into the description. Priya would lead a weekly review of guest concerns and would have direct access to Elena without local management approval. When Priya left, Maya was waiting in the main dining room with name cards for the first training group. She saw Priya and smiled. Priya stopped beside her. "You were the one with the water, right?" Maya looked embarrassed. "Apparently that's my entire professional identity now." "It's not a bad one." The first training session began that afternoon. Gabriel had recruited 12 people from other Amihan locations to help reopen San Francisco temporarily, along with 6 new local hires. None of them were told to memorize a speech about respect. Gabriel had heard enough polished language during the previous week. Instead, he placed a reservation tablet on a table and projected a series of ordinary scenarios onto the wall. A construction worker entered at 8 p.m. without a reservation. A family arrived 20 minutes early. A woman wearing expensive clothes asked to skip a waiting list. An elderly man wanted only dessert and coffee during a busy period. A tourist struggled to understand part of the menu. A regular customer demanded his usual table, even though another guest had reserved it. For each scenario, Gabriel asked the same question: what changes because of who this person appears to be? At first, employees tried to find sophisticated answers. Maybe the construction worker needed a quick meal. Maybe the elderly guest would spend less. Maybe the regular customer had lifetime value that justified flexibility. Gabriel listened, then said, "Nothing." He pointed to the reservation system. "Availability changes what we can offer. Timing changes what we can offer. Allergies, accessibility needs, party size, kitchen capacity, those things matter. Clothing does not, accent does not, occupation does not, whether someone looks familiar does not. We are not mind readers, and we are not gatekeepers. We are hosts." He did not mention his own experience, everyone already knew. For the next 2 days, the team practiced the less dramatic parts of hospitality, explaining waits honestly, offering alternatives without condescension, handling a full dining room without making a walk-in feel foolish for asking, and saying no when necessary without making the person receiving the answer feel smaller. Maya observed from the edge at first. On the 3rd morning, Priya handed her a mock reservation tablet. "Your turn." Maya shook her head. "I'm operations." Operations should know what operations asks people to do. Gabriel heard the exchange from across the room and hid a smile. Maya stepped behind the host stand. Her first practice guest was Elena, who deliberately asked 6 questions in a row and then changed the party size twice. Maya became flustered, lost the table assignment, recovered it, apologized too much, and finally laughed at herself. "Again," she said. By the 4th attempt, she was calm. Gabriel watched her and thought about confidence. Maya had told him she worried she did not possess the kind employers wanted. Perhaps confidence was not entering a room already certain. Perhaps it was choosing to remain present after getting something wrong. On Thursday evening, they conducted one final exercise. Gabriel disappeared for an hour and returned wearing the same faded green jacket, the same work boots and jeans from the community center renovation. He entered through the front door. A new hostess named Tessa looked up. "Good evening," she said. "Welcome to Amihan. Are you joining us for dinner?" Gabriel glanced down at his clothes. "I don't have a reservation." Tessa checked the tablet. "I can seat you at the bar now, or I have a table opening in about 25 minutes. If you'd rather wait for the table, I can bring you some water while you decide." That was all. No recognition, no dramatic pause, no lesson for an audience. Just normal service. Gabriel felt an unexpected pressure behind his eyes and looked toward the dining room before anyone could notice. Its ordinariness was what made it beautiful. After the exercise, Eleanor handed him the reopening schedule. Saturday, 5 p.m., 48 hours away. Gabriel signed the final page. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from the couple who had been turned away during the second minute he spent watching from his truck. Eleanor had tracked them through a cancelled waitlist request and sent a personal apology on his behalf. They had accepted his invitation to return. Their reservation was for Saturday at 5:15. Gabriel looked at the name on the screen. The first real test of the new Amihan would not be a disguised owner. It would be two people who already had a reason not to trust the door. At 4:42 on Saturday afternoon, Gabriel stood in the kitchen and listened to the restaurant breathe. That was how Ernesto used to describe a building before guests arrived. Every place had a sound when it was preparing to become useful. At Amihan, it was the soft movement of pans, the opening and closing of refrigeration drawers, the quick hiss of a steam wand at the bar, and the low voices of servers reviewing table numbers one last time. The dining room looked almost unchanged from the night Gabriel had been refused a seat. That mattered to him. Furniture had not made the old culture, and new furniture would not prove a new one. What changed lived in procedures and people. Guest spending history had been removed from the host tablet. Walk-in decisions now depended only on actual availability and kitchen capacity. Every closed complaint generated a second review outside the location. Employees could contact corporate directly. Service evaluations included kindness, clarity, and consistency alongside efficiency. Nobody on the floor had authority to invent categories for guests. At 4:55, Gabriel gathered the team near the kitchen doors. He kept the speech short. "You do not need to prove anything tonight," he said. "You need to serve dinner. If a problem happens, solve the problem in front of you. If you make a mistake, say so. If you don't know, ask. Do not perform goodness because you know I'm watching. Build habits you'd be comfortable using if I were 300 miles away." Maya stood near Elena with a small headset and clipboard. Priya stood with the service team. Tessa took her place at the entrance. At exactly 5, the doors opened. The first guests were a young couple celebrating an anniversary. Then came a family of 4. Then 2 women who had driven from San Jose after seeing a photo of Amihan's ube dessert online. The dining room simply began filling again. Gabriel stayed away from the entrance. At 5:13, Maya touched his arm. "They're here." The couple from the previous Friday stood outside the glass doors. Their names were Thomas and Claire Benton. Gabriel knew from the reservation record that they had almost declined the invitation. Claire wore the same lightweight hiking jacket visible on the security footage. Thomas carried a small camera bag across one shoulder. They paused before entering, and Gabriel felt a wave of embarrassment that had nothing to do with what he personally had said to them. Tessa opened the door. "Good evening. Welcome to Amihan." Thomas gave the name. Tessa checked the screen. "Mr. and Mrs. Benton, yes. Your table is ready." No one told Tessa to act especially warmly. She did not know which guests Gabriel was watching. She simply treated them well. Gabriel remained near the kitchen until the Bentons were seated. Then he approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Benton, I'm Gabriel Santos." Thomas recognized the name immediately. "The owner?" "Yes. I wanted to apologize in person for last week." Claire studied him cautiously. "The woman who emailed us already apologized." "She did. This one is mine." Gabriel did not explain Madeline. He did not blame a former employee or describe the investigation. He simply acknowledged that they had asked an ordinary question whether 2 seats were available and had been given an answer that was not true. "You should not have needed to know me to get an honest answer," he said. Thomas nodded slowly. "We almost didn't come back." "I understand." Claire looked around the room. "Why did you want us to?" Gabriel considered the question. "Because I can change a policy without you. I can't learn whether the welcome feels different without people who remember what it felt like before." For the first time, Claire smiled. "Then let us eat first." Gabriel smiled too. "That's a fair condition." He returned to the kitchen. The next 2 hours were imperfect. A new server entered the wrong modifier on an order and had to correct it. A 6-person party arrived with 7 people. The dining room ran 10 minutes behind after several tables ordered dessert at once. Maya accidentally sent a table change notice to the kitchen instead of the host stand, causing 3 confused minutes and 1 very patient line cook. Nobody panicked. Nobody invented a dishonest answer to make a problem disappear. At 7:26, the moment Gabriel remembered most clearly occurred near the front door. An older man entered alone wearing tan work pants, a windbreaker, and boots with dust around the soles. A canvas hardware store bag hung from one hand. He looked into the room, then back toward the street as though reconsidering. Tessa greeted him. The man asked if the restaurant served coffee. "We do," she said. "Just coffee?" "Coffee, tea, dessert, dinner, whatever you're in the mood for." He glanced at the dining room. "I don't need a whole table." Tessa checked the bar. "There's a comfortable seat right here." She walked him to an open stool. Nothing about the exchange lasted more than 30 seconds. Gabriel watched from beside the service station. The man's clothes reminded him of Ernesto after a maintenance shift. The slight hesitation in the doorway reminded Gabriel of an old calculation, whether a place had been designed with someone else in mind. Maya appeared beside Gabriel. "Do you know him?" "No." "Is he part of another test?" Gabriel shook his head. "No. That's why this one matters more." The man ordered coffee and a slice of calamansi tart. He stayed 35 minutes. When he left, he thanked Tessa and told her the dessert reminded him of something his sister used to make. Gabriel never learned his last name. He did not need to. At 9:40, Claire Benton waved Gabriel over. Her plate was empty except for one streak of sauce. "You wanted feedback," she said. Gabriel prepared himself. "Yes." "Our server forgot my tea for about 15 minutes. Gabriel glanced toward Priya, who was 3 tables away. Claire continued. "Then she noticed, apologized, brought it, and didn't make some elaborate excuse." Thomas smiled. "Best mistake of the evening." Gabriel laughed softly. "I'll make sure she knows." Before leaving, Claire paused near the door. "Last week, it felt like the restaurant had already decided something about us before we spoke. Tonight it felt like nobody needed to decide anything. We were just customers." After they left, Gabriel stood still for a moment. Just customers. For months his company had used words like premium, curated, elevated, and exceptional. He had forgotten how powerful ordinary could be. At 11:18, the last table departed. The team gathered near the bar, exhausted but smiling. Gabriel thanked them and sent everyone home without a celebratory speech. When the room emptied, Elena handed him the preliminary numbers. Revenue was lower than a typical Saturday before the closure. Guest satisfaction, based on the first digital surveys, was the highest the San Francisco location had recorded since opening. Gabriel looked at both figures. "We can build revenue," he said. Eleanor nodded. "Trust takes longer." His phone vibrated before he could answer. A local restaurant newsletter had published a short item about Amihan's unexplained 8-day closure and complete staff turnover. The headline read, "What happened behind the doors at Amihan?" Gabriel read it twice. The restaurant had survived its first night back. Now the story outside the restaurant was beginning. By Monday morning, the question had traveled farther than Gabriel expected. The newsletter noted that the San Francisco location had cancelled reservations for 8 days, replaced its permanent staff, and reopened without explanation. That was enough. Food forums began speculating. A local hospitality reporter emailed Elena. 2 regular customers asked whether the restaurant was in financial trouble. A supplier called to confirm that Amihan still planned to honor an upcoming purchasing agreement. By noon, Gabriel's phone contained 17 messages about a story that did not yet exist publicly. Elena walked into his office, carrying a printed communications plan. "We need to say something." Gabriel looked at the pages. "What does legal want?" "Very little." "What does public relations want?" "Much more, but polished." "And what do you want?" Elena sat across from him. "The truth without turning former employees into entertainment." Gabriel nodded. That was exactly what he wanted too. They released a statement that afternoon. It said Amihan San Francisco had discovered service practices inconsistent with company standards, had closed temporarily to review operations, and had rebuilt the location's staffing and training systems. It acknowledged that leadership had failed to identify the problem sooner. It did not name Madeline or anyone else. Gabriel insisted on adding one sentence that the communications team initially tried to remove. The failure was not limited to individual decisions. Our systems did not make it easy enough for employees or guests to raise concerns beyond local management. The sentence prevented the company from pretending the problem had entered through one person and left with her. The statement slowed speculation, but did not end it. 3 days later, Gabriel met with the financial partners who supported Amihan's expansion. The meeting took place at the group's Oakland office, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and a conference table much larger than Gabriel liked. The numbers were straightforward. The closure, refunded deposits, temporary staffing, retraining, and cancelled events would cost the company more than $180,000 by the end of the month. San Francisco revenue would miss quarterly projections. Sacramento's opening schedule might need to move by several weeks because Gabriel had pulled experienced managers into the rebuild. One partner, a cautious man named Richard Hale, tapped the report with his pen. "I'm not questioning the personnel decision," he said. "I'm questioning whether closing the restaurant was financially necessary." Gabriel looked at him. "What would you have done? Remove the manager, retrain the rest while operating, and tell guests the system had changed while the same team was still learning whether it believed that." Richard spread his hands. "Businesses correct problems while remaining open every day. Some do. You made a very expensive statement." Gabriel considered that. "No," he said. "I made an expensive repair. Statements are cheaper." The room became quiet. Gabriel was not offended by Richard's concern. A year earlier, he might have made the same calculation. Growth had taught him to measure lost days quickly and recognize a weak location at a glance. But some costs arrived late. A guest who never returned did not announce the value of every dinner they might have purchased. A good employee who left quietly did not attach an invoice to lost trust. A manager who learned that results mattered more than methods could produce acceptable numbers for months before anyone noticed what those numbers concealed. "If you want me to promise, this will never cost us money again," Gabriel told the partners, "I can't. Doing the right repair after doing the wrong thing for too long is usually expensive. What I can promise is that next time, I want our systems to tell us sooner." Richard leaned back. "Next time? At another location, another department, another kind of problem. If we build a company that can only hear good news, there will always be a next time." The meeting ended without applause, but also without opposition. That evening, Gabriel returned to San Francisco. Priya was leading the first weekly guest review meeting. Maya sat beside her with a laptop. Tessa had brought printed comment cards, even though most feedback now arrived digitally. The team discussed 6 compliments, 3 minor complaints, and 1 awkward interaction involving a guest who felt rushed near closing time. No one tried to identify whose fault it was first. They reconstructed what happened. That pleased Gabriel more than the compliments. Afterward, Maya caught him near the kitchen. "There's someone waiting for you." Gabriel assumed she meant a reporter. Instead, Madeline Kerr sat alone at the far end of the dining room. She was not wearing the black suit or silver Amihan pin he remembered. She wore a simple grey sweater and carried a thin folder on her lap. Gabriel stopped several feet away. "I wasn't expecting you." "I know. I emailed Elena. She said I could have 10 minutes if you agreed." Gabriel looked toward Elena, who stood near the office door. She gave him a small nod. He sat across from Madeline. For several seconds, neither spoke. The last time they had faced each other in this room, she had defended a system he had just ended. Gabriel expected an apology, an argument, or perhaps a request for reconsideration. Madeline offered none of those. She placed the folder on the table. "I found these at home," she said, "training notes from before the location opened. I thought you should see them." Gabriel opened the folder. Inside were printed slides from a management workshop conducted nearly a year earlier by an outside consultant Amihan had hired during expansion. Several phrases had been highlighted. Protect the premium experience. Identify high-value repeat guests. Reduce low-conversion walk-in traffic during peak windows. Empower managers to curate the room. Gabriel recognized the presentation. He had attended the first 20 minutes by video, before leaving for another meeting. His approval signature appeared on the final page. Madeline watched him read. "I'm not saying those slides told me to do everything I did," she said. "They didn't. I made choices. Some of them were bad." Gabriel looked up. She continued carefully. "But when my numbers improved, corporate praised me. When average checks went up, nobody asked how. When I reduced walk-ins, I was told the room looked more controlled. I started believing I was doing exactly what leadership wanted." Gabriel felt no sudden sympathy that erased the previous week. Madeline had lied to guests. She had encouraged shortcuts. She had created categories that reduced people to assumptions. Those were her decisions. But the folder placed another piece onto the table. "Why bring this now?" he asked. Madeline looked around the restaurant. "Because for a few days, I was angry enough to tell myself you were blaming me for everything. Then I read my own notes. That wasn't true either. I don't want my job back. I just don't think you'll fix the whole problem if you believe it started with me." Gabriel closed the folder. It was the most useful thing she had ever said to him. After Madeline left, he remained alone at the table. Elena approached but did not sit. "You okay?" Gabriel looked at his signature on the last page. "I spent a week asking what kind of manager she became when I wasn't in the room." He tapped the paper once. "I think I also need to ask what kind of company I built when I wasn't paying attention to the words we used." Elena pulled out the chair across from him. The San Francisco problem had been repaired enough to reopen. For the first time, Gabriel understood that San Francisco might not be the end of the repair. It might only be where he finally learned to look. Gabriel cancelled his trip to Sacramento the next morning. Instead, he asked Elena to bring him every training deck, performance scorecard, manager incentive plan, and guest experience report used across the Amihan group during the previous 2 years. By noon, his office floor was covered with paper. The discovery was not a hidden scandal. In some ways, that made it more unsettling. There was no single policy telling managers to value wealthy-looking guests. No instruction asked employees to judge clothing. No executive had created the grey table code used in San Francisco. What Gabriel found was a collection of small signals pointing in the same direction. Managers received bonuses partly based on average guest spending. High-spend repeat customers were highlighted in the reservation system. Training materials repeatedly described Amihan as aspirational, premium, selective, and elevated. A workshop told managers to reduce friction from low-conversion traffic. Another advised hosts to protect the room during peak hours. Each phrase could be defended individually. Together they formed a language that could make hospitality sound like filtering. Gabriel had approved most of it, not because he wanted Amihan to become cold. He had been trying to protect quality while the company grew faster than his physical presence could follow. The first restaurant had operated on instinct because Gabriel was there every day. He knew when to squeeze in a walk-in, when to send dessert to a tired family, when to ask a guest to wait, and how to make that wait feel respectful. When Amihan expanded, instincts had to become systems. Somewhere in that translation, efficiency had received more precise measurements than kindness. The company had learned what was easiest to count. Maya found Gabriel sitting on the floor beside a stack of old scorecards. She stopped in the doorway. "Is this a bad time?" "Probably. Come in." She stepped carefully between papers. "Elena said you wanted the internship feedback survey." Gabriel accepted the folder, then held up an old performance sheet. "What does this tell you?" Maya read it. "Table turn time, average check, upsell rate, reservation conversion, labor efficiency." "It tells me whether a shift made money," she said. "Does it tell you whether people were treated well?" "No. We thought customer reviews covered that." Maya sat in the chair beside him. "Reviews happen after." Gabriel looked at her. "Meaning?" If the only way you know whether someone felt welcome is whether they go home and write about it, you're making the guest do your quality control. He stared at the scorecard again. You're annoyingly useful. That's going in my internship evaluation. For the next 3 weeks, Gabriel turned the San Francisco repair into a company-wide redesign. He did not create a slogan first. He created routes for information. Every employee concern could now bypass local management. Every closed complaint required review by someone outside the location. Reservation screens no longer displayed spending categories to hosts. Manager bonuses were changed, so revenue could not outweigh service quality measures. Mystery diner evaluations focused less on scripted greetings and more on consistency across different types of guests. Gabriel also added something Elena initially called impossible to measure. Once a week, each location had to discuss one decision that had been difficult but human, not a success story, not a complaint score, a decision. A family arriving late because of traffic, a guest who could not understand the menu, a worker coming in near closing, a regular customer asking for an exception. The point was not to force the same answer every time. The point was to make employees explain what they had considered, besides revenue and speed. You're trying to measure judgment, Elena said. I'm trying to keep judgment from becoming invisible. At San Francisco, the new team gradually stopped feeling new. Priya completed her first month as service lead without missing a single weekly review. She was more direct than before, sometimes uncomfortably so. When a temporary host suggested holding a desirable table in case an important regular arrived, Priya asked one question. Important to whom? The table went to the guests who were actually waiting. Maya became comfortable moving between operations and the dining room. She still carried 3 pens. She still prepared too much, but she had stopped apologizing before speaking. One afternoon, Gabriel watched her explain the complaint routing system to a group of managers visiting from Los Angeles. She spoke clearly, answered questions she knew, and said, "I don't know, but I'll find out," when she did not. Afterward, Elena joined Gabriel near the bar. "She'll run a place someday. If we don't ruin her first." Elena smiled, optimistic as always. 30 days after reopening, the San Francisco numbers surprised everyone. Revenue had not only recovered, it exceeded the same period from the previous quarter by 6%. Walk-in conversion rose. Average guest spending fell slightly, exactly as Gabriel expected, but more tables were filled, and repeat reservations increased. The lesson was simpler. Amihan had been turning away demand while telling itself exclusion protected the brand. The restaurant had mistaken scarcity for prestige. On a Thursday evening, Gabriel finally took the seat he had originally asked for. The bar was half full. He wore a clean shirt this time, though Ernesto's faded green jacket rested over the back of his stool. He ordered pancit and sparkling water, and ate without anyone hovering around him. Halfway through dinner, Priya placed an envelope beside his plate. "This came for you." There was no return address. Inside was a handwritten note from Claire and Thomas Benton. They had returned twice since reopening, both times without contacting Gabriel. The note thanked him for inviting them back, but one sentence mattered most. "We came the 3rd time because we forgot we were checking whether the place had changed." Gabriel read the line again. That was what trust looked like when it returned. Eventually, a person stopped measuring it. He folded the note and placed it in his jacket pocket. Then the front door opened. Ernesto Santos stepped inside. Gabriel straightened in surprise. His father wore the same grey work shirt he often wore at the community center, dark pants and old shoes polished unevenly at the toes. Lorna walked beside him in a blue cardigan, smiling as if she had been keeping a secret all day. Gabriel stood. "What are you doing here?" "Eating," Ernesto said. "Restaurants still do that," Lorna laughed. Tessa approached from the host stand. She had never met Gabriel's parents. Gabriel opened his mouth to introduce them. Then he stopped. Ernesto noticed. A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Don't help," he said quietly. Gabriel understood. His parents walked toward the host stand as ordinary guests without a reservation. For 30 days, Gabriel had redesigned policies, rewritten incentives, retrained managers, and told himself Amihan was becoming the place he originally meant to build. Now his father, the man whose old work clothes had inspired the values Gabriel nearly lost, was standing at the same entrance where Gabriel had once been refused. Tessa looked up from the reservation screen. "Good evening," she said warmly. "Welcome to Amihan. How can I help you tonight?" Gabriel remained by the bar. For once he did not need to intervene, he only needed to watch what happened when nobody at the door knew the story. Tessa did not look toward Gabriel for help. That was the first thing he noticed. She stood behind the host stand with the reservation tablet, resting lightly in both hands, while Ernesto and Lorna waited in front of her. To anyone else, they were simply an older couple who had arrived without a reservation on a busy Thursday evening. Ernesto's grey work shirt was clean, but faded at the elbows. Lorna carried a small handbag and wore the blue cardigan Gabriel had seen at family dinners for years. "We didn't book," Ernesto said. "My wife decided she wanted pancit 10 minutes ago." Lorna nudged him with her elbow. "He decided. I just agreed." Tessa smiled. "Then I'm glad you came. I have 2 options. I can seat you at the bar now, or I can have a table ready in about 20 minutes. If you'd like to wait, I can bring you water and the menu so you can look it over." No hesitation, no glance at their clothes, no question designed to discover whether they were worth the effort. Ernesto looked at Lorna. "Bar?" "Table," she said. "Your back complains at the bar." "My back complains everywhere." Tessa laughed softly. "Table it is." She invited them to sit on the bench near the entrance and offered tea while they waited. Then she returned to the next guests as if nothing important had happened. Gabriel remained near the far end of the bar, holding a glass of sparkling water he had forgotten to drink. For 30 days he had revised policies, changed incentives, replaced a team, rebuilt complaint channels, and reviewed decisions until Elena accused him of reading seating charts in his sleep. None of those things felt as convincing as watching Tessa give his parents the same ordinary courtesy she had given everyone else. Ernesto caught Gabriel's eye from the bench. He did not smile triumphantly. He only nodded once. 20 minutes later, the table was ready exactly when Tessa had promised. Priya greeted Ernesto and Lorna at the table without knowing who they were. She explained 2 dishes, answered Lorna's question about the vinegar in the adobo glaze, and noticed that Ernesto was struggling slightly with the small print on the menu. Without making a performance of it, she returned with a larger print menu. Gabriel felt something loosen in his chest. He had forgotten how exhausting suspicion could become when carried too long. When their food arrived, Gabriel finally walked over. Lorna looked up with exaggerated surprise. "Oh, you work here?" Gabriel laughed despite himself. Tessa, passing with a tray, stopped so suddenly that he saw the realization reach her face. "Mr. Santos." "Tessa, these are my parents, Ernesto and Lorna Santos." Her eyes widened. "Oh, I didn't know." Ernesto pointed gently at her. "Good." For half a second, Tessa looked worried that she had done something wrong. Then Ernesto added, "You were exactly the same before you knew. Keep that." Tessa's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you, sir." "Ernesto, if you call me sir, I start looking for my father." She smiled and continued toward the kitchen. Gabriel sat with his parents after the dinner rush softened. He expected Ernesto to congratulate him on the changes. Instead, his father slowly folded his napkin and asked, "How long are you going to stand over there watching the door?" Gabriel looked toward the entrance. "I'm not watching it all the time." Lorna raised one eyebrow. Gabriel corrected himself. "Not literally all the time." "You fixed the rules," Ernesto said. "You trained the people, you gave them a way to speak. Now what?" "Now I make sure it works." "For how long?" Gabriel had no answer. His father leaned back carefully in the chair. "When you were 12, I taught you to tighten a bolt on the old Corolla, do you remember? You made me redo it 3 times. Because the first 2 were bad. The third was right. After that, did I stand next to you every time you touched a wrench? No. Then I trusted what I taught you." Gabriel understood the comparison and disliked how accurate it was. Since the reopening, He had told himself his constant presence was responsibility. Some of it was. Some of it was fear wearing responsible clothes. If he needed to see every good decision personally, then he had not rebuilt a culture. He had built a stage where people behaved correctly, because the owner might be watching. The next morning, Maya accidentally confirmed it. She was reviewing feedback from the reopening team when she paused outside Gabriel's office. "Can I say something without it becoming a project?" "That depends on what you say." She stepped inside. "Some people are nervous around you." Gabriel looked up from his laptop. "Because I fired the previous team. Partly. But also because you're everywhere. Hosts think you're checking the host stand. Servers think you're checking table language. Kitchen staff think you're counting ticket times. I do check those things." "I know." Maya sat across from him. "The problem is, sometimes they stop making decisions when you're close. They wait to see what you think." Gabriel stared at her. That was the opposite of what he wanted. He had spent weeks trying to build people who would act well when he was absent. By refusing to be absent, he might be preventing them from learning how. That afternoon he called Elena and told her he was taking 3 days away from the San Francisco location. "Vacation?" she asked. "Don't make it sound dangerous." "Where are you going?" "Daly City, community center. My father says they still need shelves built." Eleanor was quiet for a beat. "And Amihan?" Gabriel looked through the glass wall of his office. Priya was discussing a seating problem with Tessa. Maya stood nearby, listening but not interfering. No one looked toward him. "Amihan stays open," he said. His first day away felt unnatural. At the community center, Gabriel spent the morning measuring shelves with Ernesto and the afternoon assembling cabinets beside volunteers who knew him only as Gabe. His phone remained in his pocket more than he expected. He checked the restaurant dashboard at lunch, then stopped himself from opening the camera feed. At 4, Eleanor sent one message. "Busy night. Team handled it." Gabriel typed 3 different questions, deleted all of them, and finally replied, "Good." That evening, he sat outside the community center with his father while the fog moved over the rooftops of Daly City. "Did the restaurant survive without you?" Ernesto asked. "Apparently." "Terrible news." Gabriel smiled. For the first time since the night he had been turned away from his own door, he understood that rebuilding Amihan required one final ingredient no manual could provide. Trust. Not blind trust. Not careless trust. Trust supported by clear standards, open information and consequences when needed, but still trust. Gabriel looked at the old work shirt his father wore and thought about how much of his life had been built from lessons Ernesto never announced as lessons. A good door needed someone responsible for opening it. A good company needed something harder, people who knew what to do after the owner walked away. Gabriel stayed away from Amihan, San Francisco, for 3 full days. Nothing collapsed. On Friday morning, Elena sent him the weekly operating report. Guest satisfaction had risen slightly. Kitchen timing was steady. One complaint had been filed about a long wait for a walk-in table and resolved with a clear explanation, an apology and a follow-up call from Priya. The guest had already booked again for the following month. Gabriel read the report twice, then closed it. There was no emergency hidden between the lines. That fact felt almost unfamiliar. At the community center, the renovated kitchen opened that afternoon with less ceremony than Gabriel expected. Folding tables filled the multi-purpose room. Neighbors brought trays of noodles, rice cakes, fruit, and warm bread. Children carried paper plates between adults, who kept telling them to slow down. Ernesto stood near the new cabinets, explaining to anyone who would listen that the hinges were better than the expensive ones the contractor had recommended. Lorna told him to stop giving tours of hinges. He gave another one 10 minutes later. Gabriel had donated money to the project, but standing there made him realize the money was the least memorable part. What people noticed were the volunteers who had painted walls, installed shelves, tested burners, and stayed late cleaning dust from the floor. A place became useful through repeated acts no one photographed. Maya arrived after her afternoon class carrying 2 foil trays from Amihan. "Priya sent lumpia," she said, "and she told me to say the kitchen made too much by accident." Gabriel looked at the perfectly arranged trays. Did they accidentally include dipping sauce in labeled containers? A very organized accident. Maya had been spending part of her internship at the corporate office, part at San Francisco, and one afternoon each week observing operations at another Amihan location. She had stopped carrying 3 pens. Now she carried 4. They stood near the serving table while volunteers opened the trays. "How is the restaurant without me?" Gabriel asked. Maya considered the question carefully. "Quieter." He frowned. She laughed. "I'm joking. Mostly." Then she became serious. People made decisions faster. Priya handled 2 issues without calling Elena. Tessa changed the waiting list order when a family had to leave early, but she explained the change to everyone affected first. "Nobody complained," Gabriel nodded. "Good. You don't sound disappointed enough." "I'm growing." "Very inspiring." Before he could answer, Ernesto called for help carrying a box of serving bowls. The box was not heavy, but Ernesto insisted on holding one side. Halfway across the room, they passed a group of men in work uniforms from a nearby maintenance company. Their shirts were marked with dust and paint from a job. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Noel, recognized Gabriel. "You're the restaurant guy, right?" Gabriel set down the box. "Depends what you've heard." Noel smiled. "My wife keeps trying to get me to go to Amihan. I keep telling her that's a place for anniversaries and people who know which fork to use. There's only one fork you need to worry about, the one that gets food to your mouth." The men laughed. Noel shook his head. "Still, I come home looking like this most days. I don't want to walk into some fancy room and feel like I made a mistake." The sentence was casual. It stayed with Gabriel for the rest of the afternoon. The old Amihan had not only turned away people at the door, it had taught some people to reject themselves before they ever reached it. That evening, Gabriel returned to San Francisco for the first time in 3 days. He did not enter through the front. He went to the office, reviewed the numbers with Elena, and then sat with Priya after closing. "I want to try something," he said. Priya waited. "1 Sunday a month, early dinner, family-style menu, fixed price lower than our standard dinner, no dress expectations beyond basic safety, walk-ins protected until a certain hour." Priya studied him. "A community night. Not charity. Not a discount night for people we decide need help. I don't want anyone arriving with a label attached to them. Just a night designed to make the room easier to enter." What would we call it? Gabriel thought about the bronze language consultants had suggested for previous campaigns. Heritage table, neighborhood series, community access dinner. He disliked all of it. "Sunday supper," Priya smiled. "That's it?" "That's it." Eleanor was less immediately enthusiastic. The next morning she placed a spreadsheet in front of him. Lower average checks, slower table turns, additional family-style prep. If this becomes popular, Sunday margins drop. How much? Potentially 9% for that service period. Can the restaurant absorb it? Yes, that's not the question. What's the question? Elena crossed her arms. Are you making an operating decision or correcting your feelings about what happened to you? Gabriel did not answer immediately. A month earlier, the question would have irritated him. Now he understood why she asked it. Both might be true, he said, but here's the operating case. We increased revenue after we stopped filtering walk-ins. More guests are returning. We built a restaurant around Filipino hospitality and somehow made entering it feel like an exam. If Sunday supper lowers the barrier and fills seats we can serve responsibly, that's not penance. That's business aligned with what we're supposed to be. Elena looked at the spreadsheet again. 3-month pilot. Agreed. We measure repeat visits, staff load, and guest satisfaction. Agreed. And you don't turn it into a speech every Sunday. Gabriel smiled. That condition feels personal. The first Sunday supper filled in 4 days. Noel came with his wife and 2 daughters. Gabriel recognized him immediately because he arrived wearing the same maintenance company shirt. Freshly washed but still marked with old paint near one cuff. At the door, Noel slowed down. His wife reached for his hand. Tessa greeted them. Welcome to Amihan, Santos family. Noel glanced at Gabriel across the room, then back at Tessa. Reyes. Right here. We have you at table 12. No special pause. No reassurance that exposed his nervousness. No performance. Just a table. Later, Gabriel watched Noel's youngest daughter teach him how to fold a napkin into something that resembled a bird. Priya carried a platter of pancit to the table. Tessa brought extra rice before anyone asked. Around them sat nurses finishing a shift, a retired couple, 2 university students, a family celebrating a promotion, and a pair of regular guests who usually booked Friday nights. No one needed to know which guests could afford the standard tasting menu. For 3 hours, the room was simply full. Near the end of service, Noel stopped beside Gabriel. "My wife was right," he said. "About the restaurant?" "About me overthinking the fork." Gabriel laughed. Noel looked back at his family. "We'll come again." It was a small sentence. Gabriel had learned to listen differently to small sentences. The first time. Claire and Thomas wrote that they had forgotten to check whether Amihan had changed. He understood trust could return quietly. Now Noel had crossed a door he had been prepared to avoid. That was different. Amihan was no longer only repairing the experience of people who had once felt unwelcome. It was beginning to reach people who had assumed long before arriving that a beautiful room could not possibly have been built for them. 3 weeks into the Sunday supper pilot, Gabriel faced the first serious disagreement about the direction of Amihan. It happened in a conference room in Sacramento, not in a dining room. The Amihan group had grown to 5 locations, and growth had brought investors who cared about the company for reasons different from Gabriel's. They were not villains. They had supported expansion, approved kitchen upgrades, and helped finance the systems that allowed hundreds of employees to earn stable paychecks. They also expected Gabriel to explain why a successful restaurant group was deliberately lowering prices during a service period that could probably support higher ones. Martin Cho, a board member with a background in hotel development, slid the Sunday numbers across the table. "Guest counts are excellent," he said, "but average check is down 11% during the pilot window." "Expected," Gabriel replied, "and the standard Sunday waitlist was already healthy." "Also true," Martin tapped the report. "Then, help me understand why we're solving a demand problem we didn't have." Gabriel looked at Eleanor, who sat 2 seats away. She did not rescue him. He had asked her not to. 6 months earlier, he might have defended the idea by talking about values first. A month earlier, he might have talked about the night he was refused a table. Both arguments mattered, but neither was enough to run a company. So Gabriel opened the second report. "Because we're not solving a demand problem," he said, "we're solving a relationship problem." He showed them the numbers. Sunday supper guests returned on other days at a higher rate than first-time standard dinner guests. Nearly a third had booked another Amihan visit within 4 weeks. Family reservations increased. Walk-in conversion remained higher across the week. Employee satisfaction at San Francisco had also improved because the service model allowed the team to practice hospitality without constant pressure to maximize every table. Most importantly, standard dinner revenue had not fallen. The pilot was not replacing premium demand. It was creating new relationships with guests who had not previously considered Amihan part of their lives. Martin read silently. "This could be a brand expansion strategy," he said. Gabriel shook his head. "It can create brand expansion. I don't want us to start there. The moment we turn every decent act into a marketing category, employees learn to perform the category instead of understanding the reason." Another board member, Julia Mercer, leaned forward. "Then what is the reason?" Gabriel thought about Ernesto's work shirt, Noel's hesitation, Maya's bottle of water, Priya's complaint that had disappeared into a bad system. "A restaurant is a business built around letting strangers enter," he said. "We became very sophisticated at the business part and careless about the entering part. I'm correcting that. The financial results tell us correction isn't hurting the company. In several ways, it's making us stronger." The room was quiet. Martin finally nodded. "Keep the pilot through the quarter, If the retention holds, bring us a plan for the other locations." Gabriel closed the folder. He did not feel victorious. He felt relieved that he had learned to translate conviction into evidence without reducing conviction to a number. Back in San Francisco, another kind of decision was waiting. Maya's internship was nearing its end. She had one semester left at school and had assumed she would return to her part-time campus job afterward. Instead, Eleanor and Priya had prepared a proposal for a paid management development position that would allow her to finish her degree while rotating through guest service, operations, and training. Gabriel called Maya into the private dining room. She looked suspicious when she saw the folder. "Am I being fired from an internship?" "That's difficult to do. Internships end by themselves." That sounded like a yes for a second. He slid the proposal toward her. Maya read the first page, then the second. Her eyes stopped moving. "This is full-time after graduation. If you want it, part-time until then." "Management development? You keep asking questions that make managers uncomfortable. We decided to monetize the problem." She laughed, then covered her mouth because emotion had arrived faster than she expected. Gabriel gave her time. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said. "Good." She looked up. "Good?" People who are certain they're ready to lead usually haven't understood the job. Maya looked down at the offer again. "What if I make the wrong call?" Gabriel leaned back. "You will. I still do. The goal isn't never being wrong. It's building enough honesty around you that wrong decisions can be corrected before they become a culture." That sentence surprised him as he said it. It was the clearest description yet of what he had learned. Maya signed the acceptance page 2 days later. Her first assignment in the new role was not glamorous. She had to help redesign orientation for incoming employees across all locations. She removed 12 slides. Gabriel discovered this when he opened the draft and found a section titled Premium Guest Expectations completely missing. "Where did it go?" he asked. "Away." Very technical answer. It said things like anticipate high-value preferences. Those preferences still matter. Yes, so do everybody else's. I replaced it with know the guest in front of you. Gabriel read the new section. It asked employees to observe actual needs rather than assumed status. Mobility, menu questions, time constraints, celebrations, allergies, confusion, children, language comfort, and whether a guest seemed unsure about how the restaurant worked. Nothing about clothes, nothing about estimated spending, nothing about being impressive enough to deserve attention. "Keep it," he said. The next test came unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday. A transit delay sent dozens of people onto the sidewalks near the Embarcadero. Amihan's entryway filled with guests arriving early to escape the weather. At the same time, a delivery driver named Ben arrived with 2 boxes for the kitchen. His jacket was soaked. The delivery entrance was blocked temporarily by maintenance equipment, so he came through the front and stood awkwardly beside the host station, water dripping from his sleeves. Gabriel happened to be in the office upstairs. He saw none of it. Tessa did. She called the kitchen to confirm the delivery, then looked at the crowded entrance. "You're going to be waiting a few minutes for someone to sign those," she told Ben. "Put them here so you don't have to hold them. Do you want a towel?" Ben hesitated. "I'm fine, I don't want to get the floor messed up." "The floor cleans, you're soaked." She brought him a clean service towel and a cup of hot tea from the bar. One of the waiting guests shifted to make room on the bench. 10 minutes later, Ben left through the front door dry enough to be comfortable, and carrying an Amihan paper bag Priya had added to the signed delivery. Gabriel learned about it only because Ben emailed the general guest address that night. He wrote 3 sentences thanking the staff for treating him like he was not in the way. Gabriel printed the email. The next morning, he placed it on the staff board without adding his name, a speech, or a reward. Above it, he wrote only, "This is the work." Then he walked away before anyone could thank him for noticing. By early autumn, Amihan San Francisco no longer felt like a restaurant recovering from something. It felt like a restaurant becoming itself. That distinction mattered to Gabriel. For months, every improvement had been described in relation to the night he was refused. The new complaint channel existed because the old one failed. The new host training existed because the previous team judged people too quickly. Sunday supper existed because some guests had learned to assume elegant rooms were not meant for them. Eventually, a place had to become more than the correction of its worst evening. Gabriel saw that shift on a Saturday when he arrived shortly before lunch and realized no one reacted to him. Not disrespectfully, Normally, Tessa was helping a family rearrange a reservation. Priya was discussing a menu change with the kitchen. Maya, now splitting her time between school and the management program, was training 2 new employees at the bar. Gabriel crossed the dining room and reached his office without anyone abandoning a task to ask what he needed. He smiled as he closed the door. An hour later, Elena called. "You sound cheerful," she said. "Nobody cared that I walked in." "Congratulations on becoming irrelevant. I've worked hard for this." The company-wide cultural review was nearly complete. San Francisco had triggered audits at every location, and the findings were less dramatic than Gabriel had feared, but still useful. One location had overly rigid reservation rules. Another had a manager who avoided guest complaints because she hated confrontation. A third had excellent hospitality, but poor documentation, meaning its culture depended too heavily on 2 experienced supervisors. None required the kind of complete reset San Francisco had needed. All required attention. Gabriel no longer saw those findings as evidence that Amihan was failing. He saw them as evidence that healthy companies needed ways to discover ordinary weaknesses before they became defining ones. Eleanor's team created quarterly culture reviews that included employees from different levels, not only managers. Each location had to bring one practice it was proud of, and one practice it wanted challenged. Maya suggested the second requirement. "Otherwise, everyone brings a success story and goes home feeling excellent," she said. Gabriel approved it immediately. The most surprising change was personal. He stopped using the security cameras except when an operational issue required it. The app remained on his phone. He did not delete it. Accountability still mattered, but he no longer opened the feeds late at night simply to reassure himself that people were behaving correctly. One evening, as he left the restaurant, his thumb hovered over the camera icon from old habit. Then he locked the screen instead. Across the dining room, Maya was showing a new server how to describe the family-style menu without assuming whether a guest wanted the least expensive or most expensive option. Priya was near the door. Tessa was laughing with an elderly couple whose reservation had been delayed. Gabriel did not need a closer angle. The following Sunday marked the 3rd month of Sunday supper. Every seat was booked. Noel and his family had become regulars. Claire and Thomas were there with friends. Gabriel's parents had a table near the open kitchen, where Ernesto had somehow convinced a line cook to explain the mounting brackets used under one of the shelves. "He cannot enter a building without inspecting hardware," Gabriel told Lorna. "I gave up in 1998, she replied. Near the middle of service, the restaurant lights flickered. Once, twice. Then half the dining room went dark. A failed electrical component in the building had taken out several circuits. Emergency lighting came on immediately, but the kitchen lost power to part of the line. The room filled with the low murmur that begins whenever 100 people realize plans have changed at the same time. 6 months earlier, Gabriel would have moved instantly. He would have gone to the kitchen, called the building manager, reorganized the floor, and placed himself at the center of every decision. He stood from his parents' table, then stopped. Priya was already moving. She met the chef at the pass, confirmed which equipment remained functional, and told the host stand to pause new seating. Maya went table to table explaining the delay. Tessa offered guests the option to stay, reschedule, or receive the unfinished portion of dinner removed from the bill. No one pretended nothing was wrong. No one panicked. No one looked for Gabriel. Ernesto watched his son standing beside the table. "Sit," he said. Gabriel did. Within 15 minutes, the team had converted the service into a limited cold and warm menu using the functioning side of the kitchen. Some guests chose to leave and were rebooked. Most stayed. Someone near the window turned on the flashlight of a phone and placed it beneath an empty water glass, creating a small improvised lamp. Other tables copied the idea until the room glowed with soft circles of light. The inconvenience became strangely warm. Maya came to Ernesto and Lorna's table. "Mr. and Mrs. Santos, your next course will be delayed. We can bring dessert first if you don't mind eating in the wrong order." Ernesto looked delighted. "At my age, correct order is overrated," Lorna pointed at him. Bring mine first. He steals bites. Maya laughed and moved on. Gabriel watched her go. He had once believed leadership meant seeing problems before everyone else. Then he believed it meant correcting problems decisively. Now, in a half-dark restaurant, he saw another version. Leadership could mean building people who did not need your hands on every problem. When full power returned 40 minutes later, the room applauded the staff. Priya came to Gabriel afterward, exhausted but smiling. We survived. I noticed. You didn't do anything. I know, I'm very proud of myself. She laughed. Then Gabriel became serious. You didn't need me. That's the point. Priya looked around at the team resetting the room. We knew what mattered. Keep people informed. Give them choices. Don't make anyone feel like a problem because the building has one. Gabriel nodded. There it was. Not a script. Judgment. The thing he had been trying to build all along. Later, after the final guests left, Gabriel walked alone to the entrance. The glass doors reflected the dining room behind him. Months earlier, he had stood on the other side wearing his father's old jacket, while people inside decided he did not belong. For a long time, he had thought the lesson of that night was about appearances. It was larger than that. The real danger had been certainty, the speed with which people could create a complete story about a stranger, an employee, a manager, or even themselves, and then stop looking for evidence that the story might be wrong. Gabriel had done it too. He had believed a polished report meant a healthy location. He had believed firing people could finish a correction. He had believed constant supervision was the same as responsible leadership. Each belief had contained part of the truth and missed the rest. He opened the front door and stepped onto the sidewalk. The evening air was cool. For the first time in months, he did not turn around to check the restaurant before walking away. 6 months after the night Gabriel Santos was refused a table in his own restaurant, he returned to Amihan wearing the same green jacket. Not as a test. That mattered. The jacket had belonged to Ernesto for years. The paint near one cuff had faded, and Lorna had repaired a small tear inside the pocket with mismatched thread. Gabriel had never replaced it. That Saturday morning, he had spent 4 hours at the Daly City Community Center, helping install a second row of shelves in the pantry. By late afternoon, there was sawdust on his jeans and a pale streak of joint compound near his shoulder. The resemblance to that first night was unmistakable. The same jacket, the same tired hands, the same restaurant glowing through glass. But Gabriel was not interested in recreating humiliation, so he could enjoy a different ending. He had learned enough to know that people should not have to pass secret tests designed by powerful men. He simply wanted dinner. When he entered, Tessa looked up. You're early. I'm hungry. That sounds serious. Bar or table? Whatever is easier. She checked the tablet. Table 19 is open now. The bar is full. 19 is fine. No one stared at the jacket or rushed toward him because he owned the place. Tessa handed him a menu and pointed toward the dining room. Priya will send someone over. Gabriel smiled. Perfect. He sat alone near the window. Around him, Amihan moved with the confident disorder of a busy restaurant. Plates passed beneath warm lights. Families leaned across tables. A server explained a menu item to an older guest. At the host stand, 2 walk-ins were told there would be a 30-minute wait and were offered water. Nothing looked revolutionary. That was the achievement. Kindness had become routine. Maya spotted Gabriel halfway through his meal and joined him for 2 minutes between training sessions. Her management development position would become full-time on Monday. You look exactly like you did in the security video, she said. Thank you. I think. Less angry. Definitely thank you. Maya glanced at the jacket. Do you ever think about that night? Gabriel looked toward the entrance. Less often than I used to. I still think about the water sometimes, Maya said. Everyone tells the story like I did something big. I only saw someone sitting alone and brought him water. That's why it mattered, Gabriel said. You didn't know it mattered. Before she could answer, Tessa approached the table. Sorry to interrupt. Gabe, there's someone at the door asking if we're still serving lunch portions. Why are you asking me? Tessa blinked, then caught herself. Habit. Sorry, I'll handle it. Gabriel grinned. Good answer. He watched her return to the entrance. An older Filipino man stood there holding a reusable grocery bag. He wore a windbreaker zipped to the neck, loose khaki pants, and shoes that had been repaired more than once. His hair was silver. He looked through the dining room with the cautious expression of someone trying to decide whether he had misunderstood what kind of place he had entered. Gabriel did not know him. That made the moment important, in a way no planned test could have been. Tessa spoke with him briefly. The man pointed at a small card in his hand. Gabriel recognized it as a Sunday supper card, distributed at the community center months earlier, though today was Saturday. Tessa checked the time. The lower-priced Sunday menu was not available. For 1 second, Gabriel wondered what she would do. Then he caught the old impulse and let it go. This was not his decision to steal from her. Tessa explained something to the man. He nodded, embarrassed, and began to turn away. Priya happened to pass. Tessa called her over. They spoke quietly, checked the reservation tablet, then approached the man together. Priya pointed toward the bar, where one seat had opened. Later, Gabriel learned what they had decided. They could not offer the Sunday menu on Saturday without creating a promise the kitchen was not prepared to keep. They also did not want a guest to feel foolish for misunderstanding the card. So Tessa had explained the regular lunch options and mentioned that a smaller rice and adobo plate was available at the bar. It was within the man's budget. No rule had been broken. No one had been given charity they had not requested. No one had been sent away ashamed. The man sat at the bar and ate slowly. When he finished, he asked the bartender for a pen and wrote something on the back of his receipt. Then he left. The bartender carried the receipt to Priya. Priya read it, and after a moment brought it to Gabriel. The handwriting was uneven but clear. I thought I came on the wrong day. Thank you for not making me feel like the wrong person. Gabriel read the sentence twice. He folded the receipt carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of Ernesto's jacket. That evening, after service, the staff gathered for Maya's final internship review and unofficial graduation dinner. Eleanor, Ernesto, and Lorna joined them. Priya gave Maya a new set of pens, 4 of them. Corporate leadership equipment, she said. Maya laughed until she saw the small engraved case. Then she became quiet. Gabriel waited until everyone had food before speaking. He kept it short, partly because Elena had made him promise. 6 months ago, I thought this restaurant failed because people forgot who owned it, he said. I was wrong. It failed because we had stopped making it easy for people to remember why it existed. He looked around the table. We serve food. We run a business. We have standards. We need profit because people need paychecks, and kitchens need equipment, and good work needs to last. None of that conflicts with treating people with dignity. The mistake is believing dignity is an extra we provide after everything else goes right. Ernesto nodded slowly. Gabriel continued. It is part of the work. He kept the receipt in his pocket. Some moments did not need to become company stories. Months later, a small brass plaque appeared beside the entrance to Amihan, San Francisco. It was not large enough to dominate the room. Most guests noticed it only while waiting for a table. Gabriel had rejected 12 versions written by branding consultants. The final words were his father's. Make the place useful. Make the welcome real. On the first evening after the plaque was installed, Gabriel stood across the street where his old truck had once been parked. Fog softened the lights along the Embarcadero. Through the windows he could see Tessa at the host stand, Priya moving between tables, Maya speaking with a new employee, and strangers arriving one after another. Some wore suits, some wore work uniforms. Some arrived uncertain. Some entered as if they had been coming for years. The door opened for all of them. Gabriel slipped his hands into the pockets of the old green jacket. For most of his life, he had believed strength meant proving that no one could define him by the way he looked, where his parents had worked, or how ordinary his beginnings had been. Now he understood strength differently. It was having enough confidence in one's own worth that there was no need to measure anyone else's before offering respect. A person did not become important when someone discovered a title, a bank account, or a familiar name. They arrived important. The rest was simply whether the people at the door remembered it. Gabriel watched Amihan for another moment. Then he turned toward home without checking the cameras. Behind him, the door opened again, and someone was welcomed inside.